The convent of Santa Maddalena had always been a tranquil place, isolated from the world. The nuns lived by a routine of prayers, daily tasks, and reflection. It was a haven of peace, a refuge for those who sought to dedicate their lives to faith. But everything changed the day Sister Elena arrived. Tall, with a commanding presence and a gaze that inspired both respect and fear, Sister Elena was no ordinary nun. Rumor had it she had traveled to distant, perilous lands, facing hardships that shaped her into what she was, a woman of unwavering faith but with a character as unyielding as iron. Her reputation preceded her, and when the Mother Superior announced that she would be responsible for preparing the novices for their spiritual commitment, no one could have imagined what was about to happen. The first meeting between Sister Elena and the novices took place in the convent's great hall. The young women stood in a line, looking at her with curiosity and a bit of apprehension. Sister Elena observed them for a moment, silently, as if she were evaluating each one. Then, she began to walk slowly in front of the line, her hands clasped, and finally spoke. "The world out there is not an easy place," she said, her voice clear and authoritative. "Faith alone is not enough to face it. You must be strong, ready to resist every temptation. And I will help you become that way. Only then will you truly be ready for your vow." The novices exchanged puzzled glances. One of them, Sister Katerina, mustered the courage to raise her hand and ask a question. "Sister Elena, what do you mean? Aren't we here to pray and learn to serve God?" Sister Elena stopped and fixed Katerina with an intense look. "Yes," she replied, "but that's not enough. Praying is easy here, where you are protected. But out there, you will be tested. You must prove you are ready, and that means facing and overcoming temptation." The following day, the training began, but it was not what the novices expected. Sister Elena gathered them in the hall and instructed them to remove their traditional garments. In their place, they were made to wear clothing entirely inappropriate for a convent, short skirts, tight shirts, and even high heels. Some novices immediately objected. "This is not right," exclaimed Sister Maria, blushing with embarrassment. "We can't dress like this. It goes against everything we stand for." Sister Elena approached her, looking calm but firm. "I know," she said. "And that's precisely why we're doing it. If you can't resist temptation here, in a controlled environment, how do you think you'll fare out there? You must learn to keep your faith and self-control in any situation." Despite their protests, the novices followed the order. They donned the outfits and were made to walk one by one across the hall. Sister Elena observed every step, every hesitation, mentally noting their reactions. In the afternoon, the training continued with other tests. Some had to walk in the courtyard, others were instructed to sit silently while being provoked with unusual questions or remarks. It was all orchestrated by Sister Elena, who never seemed to lose her composure. "This is not a game," she repeated. "It is a lesson. When you leave this convent, you will face situations that will challenge your faith. If you are not ready, you will fail." The novices didn't know what to think. Some accepted the method, convinced that Sister Elena genuinely wanted to help them. Others began to harbor doubts. In the evening, in their shared room, comments grew more frequent. "This is too much," said Sister Katerina, who had cried out of embarrassment during the day. "I don't understand how this is supposed to help us." Sister Anna, however, had a different opinion. "Maybe Sister Elena is right. We don't know what awaits us out there. Maybe this is necessary." The discussion continued late into the night, dividing the group. Meanwhile, Sister Elena retreated to her quarters. Sitting at her desk, she lit a candle and opened a notebook. She began writing notes about the novices, recording every reaction they had shown during the day. But it wasn't just a diary. Next to the notebook lay a folded letter. It was a letter Sister Elena had kept with her for years, something personal and secret. She looked at it for a moment, then placed it back in the drawer. There was something in her past that no one knew, something that explained her determination to push these young women beyond their limits. The first day of training had ended, but the real work was just beginning. Would the novices withstand Sister Elena's methods? And what secret did this severe woman harbor? One thing was certain, the convent of Santa Maddalena would never be the same. The new day began with the sound of bells calling the novices to their activities. The sun illuminated the convent of Santa Maddalena, but for the young women, every glimmer of serenity seemed to vanish. The arrival of Sister Elena and her training methods had disrupted the routine they knew, replacing it with a series of trials that left them confused, frightened, and, for some, deeply unsettled. The novices gathered in the common hall, where Sister Elena awaited them with her stern and authoritative presence. As they saw her, some lowered their gaze, while others stood frozen, trying to conceal their discomfort. The day began with a speech that only deepened the novices' uncertainty about the purpose of these trials. "Today," began Sister Elena, walking slowly before them, "we will not focus solely on external temptations. The real danger lies within your thoughts, in your deepest desires. Faith is strong only when you can recognize and control what stirs inside you." The young women listened in silence, but the atmosphere was heavy with tension. None dared to protest, though many felt uneasy. The trials began shortly after. Some novices were made to sit before a mirror, forced to stare at their reflections while wearing clothes that seemed entirely out of place in a convent, short skirts, tight blouses, even high heels. Others were subjected to simulated scenarios where they were praised for their beauty or tempted with promises of a simpler, more comfortable life outside the convent. Every gesture, every word, every reaction was closely observed by Sister Elena. "I am not judging you," she said at one point, interrupting a trial. "I am teaching you to judge yourselves. True spiritual strength comes from self-awareness." Despite her words, many of the novices felt deeply troubled. During a break, Sister Caterina approached Sister Maria, one of her closest friends. "I don't understand where this is leading," Caterina whispered, lowering her voice to avoid being overheard by Sister Elena. "This isn't how I imagined the path to our vows. I feel confused, almost lost." Maria nodded, her expression uncertain. "Perhaps there's a reason behind all this," she replied. "Perhaps Sister Elena is just preparing us for the worst. But I feel uneasy, too." Their conversation was abruptly cut short when Sister Elena appeared behind them. "You should focus on what lies ahead, not on what you do not yet understand," she said firmly. "Doubt is natural, but it must not become an obstacle. Let's get back to work." That afternoon, the trials grew even more demanding. Sister Elena introduced new exercises designed to challenge not only the novices' willpower but also their emotional resilience. One of them, Sister Anna, was compelled to speak about a moment in her life when she had felt attraction for someone. Her voice trembled as she recounted the memory, tears streaming down her face. "It's not easy to talk about," she admitted, "but I think it's important to acknowledge our weaknesses." Sister Elena nodded, though her expression remained impassive. "Acknowledging your weaknesses is only the first step. Now you must learn to overcome them." The trials tested all the novices, but they also began to notice something unusual about Sister Elena. Despite her severity, she seemed to observe each of them with a kind of care. Her words, though harsh, were never disdainful, and at the end of each day, she always left room for collective reflection. That evening, during one such reflection, one of the novices, Sister Julia, found the courage to ask a question that had lingered in everyone's minds. "Sister Elena, why are you so strict with us? Is all this truly necessary to serve God?" The room fell silent. All eyes were fixed on Sister Elena, who remained still for a moment before rising to her feet to speak. "I am not asking you to do anything I have not faced myself. The path to faith is not only made of prayers and good intentions. It is made of difficult choices, of sacrifices. If you are not ready to endure now, how will you when it truly becomes difficult?" Her words made many of the novices reflect, but they did not entirely quell their doubts. That night, as they prepared for sleep, some began to question not only Sister Elena's methods but also their own calling. "Perhaps this is not my place," Katerina whispered softly. "I don't know if I can endure this." Anna, on the other hand, seemed resolute. "I want to try," she said calmly. "I want to see if I'm truly ready." Meanwhile, Sister Elena sat in her room, lost in thought. Seated at her desk, she opened the drawer and pulled out the letter. It was old, its edges frayed, but its content was still clear. She read it slowly, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "I must do this," she murmured to herself. "For them. So they won't go through what I did." As the convent of Santa Maddalena sank into the silence of the night, tension lingered. The novices were torn between those who wanted to continue and those who considered leaving. But the mystery surrounding Sister Elena deepened. What secret did she keep? And how far was she willing to go to test these young women? One thing was certain, the path to faith would not be easy or without obstacles. The following days raised the stakes even higher. Sister Elena intensified the training, making the trials harsher and, to some, more incomprehensible. The novices were subjected to tests that challenged not only their self-control and emotional resilience but also their faith. It was no longer just about wearing provocative clothing or answering difficult questions. The trials now delved into scenarios that pushed them to their emotional and spiritual limits. One of the most grueling trials involved Sister Katerina. She was made to stand before a mirror while another novice, under Sister Elena's instructions, criticized her harshly. Every word was carefully chosen to target Katerina's vulnerabilities. The young woman tried to remain composed, but eventually, she broke into tears. "I can't do this," she said, sobbing. "This isn't fair. It shouldn't be this hard." Sister Elena approached her calmly, but her tone was firm. "Hard," she said. "The real hardship will come when the world judges you. When strangers try to tear you down. You cannot let their words destroy you. You must learn to withstand them, Katerina. Only then can you truly be free." Katerina looked up at Sister Elena but said nothing. The weight of the nun's words seemed too heavy to bear. But she wasn't the only one struggling. Other novices were also beginning to falter. Sister Maria, usually one of the most determined, confided in Sister Anna one evening during their time of rest. "I can't take this anymore," she admitted, lowering her voice. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. I thought life in the convent would be different. I don't understand why we have to go through these trials." Anna looked at her with understanding but felt a growing determination within herself. "I've had my doubts too," she admitted. "But I believe Sister Elena has a purpose. Maybe this is all truly meant to prepare us. I don't know if I can succeed, but I want to try." The divide among the novices grew more pronounced. Some were convinced that Sister Elena's methods were necessary, others saw them as needless torment. But none of them dared to leave the convent. The fear of failure, of admitting to themselves and others that they weren't ready, kept them tied to the path. Meanwhile, Sister Elena continued to observe them closely, recording every reaction and interaction in her notebook. Each evening, she meticulously noted the progress and struggles of each novice. But there was more to her actions than just observation. Her every move seemed burdened by an unspoken weight. The letter she kept with her was the key to her behavior, a secret she had yet to share with anyone. One evening, after an especially challenging day, Sister Elena summoned all the novices to the convent chapel. She arranged them in a circle and stood in the center, holding her notebook. The young women watched her with a mixture of expectation and trepidation. The silence in the room was almost tangible. Finally, Sister Elena began to speak. "I know many of you have doubts," she said, her voice calmer than usual. "And I understand why. I have asked much of you. Perhaps too much. But there is something you must know. She paused, looking each of them in the eyes. Then she continued. I have never told you what brought me here. When I was young, I was like you. I had faith, but I wasn't prepared. I had no idea of the challenges I would face. And I failed. I let temptation consume me, and my fears held me back. I made mistakes that still haunt me to this day. Her voice trembled slightly, but she pressed on. But God gave me a second chance. He showed me that even through failure, we can find redemption. And that is why I am here. I want to ensure you never face what I faced. I want you to be ready, to be strong, to never stray from your path. The novices listened in silence, moved by her words. Some lowered their gaze, while others let tears stream down their faces. For the first time, many of them began to understand Sister Elena's intentions. She wasn't there to break them but to build them up. Despite this, not everyone could forgive her methods. Sister Katerina, her voice uncertain, stood and spoke. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think I'm strong enough. Every day, I feel weaker, further from who I thought I was. Sister Elena approached her and placed a hand on her shoulder. Strength is not about never falling, she said. It's about rising every time you fall. You don't have to be perfect, Katerina. You just have to keep trying. The final trial was unlike any the novices had faced. Sister Elena asked each of them to write a letter to themselves, confessing their fears, doubts, and hopes. These letters would never be read by anyone else, but they had to be honest. During the writing, some novices wept, while others reflected deeply. It was a moment of intimacy and truth. When they were finished, Sister Elena gathered the letters and placed them in a wooden box, which she then sealed. These letters represent your past, she said. But now, I ask you to let it go. From today, you will no longer be the same. You are ready for your vow because you have faced yourselves and chosen to move forward. That evening, the vow ceremony took place in the candlelit chapel. One by one, the novices made their promises before the Mother Superior, Sister Elena, and God. For many, it was a moment of renewal and rebirth. Sister Elena watched silently, her expression for the first time appearing at peace. She knew their journey would not be easy, but she was confident they were ready to face what lay ahead. After the ceremony, Sister Elena retreated to her room. She took the letter she had carried for so long and burned it, letting the ashes scatter into the wind. It was her way of leaving the past behind, knowing she had done everything she could to prepare the novices for a future filled with challenges, but also with faith and hope. Thus, the convent of Santa Maddalena was forever changed. The novices emerged stronger, and Sister Elena, though still enigmatic, had fulfilled her mission. Her secret remained hers alone, but the impact of her guidance would endure in the lives of the young women she had shaped. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on future tales, and let us know in the comments what you think about Sister Elena's methods. What would you have done in her place? Stay tuned for more exciting and inspiring stories. See you next time.